Before we get into all the individual steps required for building a software robot, I figured I would first take you on an end-to-end, high-level tour of building a robot that does something mildly useful, so you can have a high-level vision of the overall process. That way, when you're watching the individual videos, you'll have a better sense for where they're going to fit into the big picture process. So please just sit back and take this in. Don't be intimidated by it, because I'm going to go into much greater detail in all the future lectures about these activities and many more. And you'll be able to see that there's no programming required. UiPath is open, so I'll go to the Start menu, and I'll select a blank project. In the description, I'll put my first robot. I'm going to save the output in my C drive in a development directory, followed by a UiPath directory, and I'll name it my-first-robot. So that the robot has something to do, I'm in my C drive here, and I'm going to create a new directory called robot-files, and inside there I'm going to create 3 text files. I'll call it doc1, doc2, and doc3. And all my robot is going to do is to open each of these files and let me know if it finds any text inside one of them. So the robot doesn't know this, so I'll type in "you found me" inside this text document. So right now, doc1 is empty, doc3 is empty, and doc2 has some text in it. And we want the robot to examine all 3 of these documents and let us know if any of them have text in them. It's obviously a very simple example, but I want to keep this video short and you'll get a great idea of how the tool works. The building blocks of every robot are these things called activities. And you can see in the center here we've got a panel in this main document here, and it says drop activity here. You always begin a robot by using either a sequence or a flowchart. And those can be found in our activities pane over here by expanding available and going down to workflow. Inside workflow, you'll see control flow here, and sequence lives inside there. If you expand the flowchart node, you'll find your flowchart there. Just to keep things simple, I'm going to use a sequence. So I click on that and drag it onto the main document here. And I can click in the header and I can rename this to whatever I want. And I'll just call this Find Text in Files. Almost any robot you use is going to use a thing called variables. And as you'll discover in the Tech Primer course, variables are simply buckets that hold information and allow you to read or otherwise interact with that data. The way we deal with variables in UiPath is by using the assign activity. So I'm typing that in the find window here, and I'm going to drag the assign activity right in here, and I'll create my first variable, and I'll name it all files. And right away I'll go down to the variables tab, and I'm going to change the variables type by clicking on it and clicking again, and setting it to an array of t. And what I want is an array of strings. Now I know this seems complicated right now, but I'm only including this to encourage you to go watch the Tech Primer course if you don't understand what I'm doing. This is not technically programming, but if you understood some basics about programming, and especially data types and arrays, all of which I teach in the Tech Primer course, then this wouldn't look so scary to you. Now I'll type in one little programming statement here, directory.getFiles. And I'll double click on that, and when I open my parentheses, you can see that I need to supply a path as a string. And you may recall that in my C drive here, I created a directory called robot files. And this is the exact path that I'm looking for. So I'm going to copy that and paste that in here as a string. So now you can see that exclamation mark went away and UiPath is happy. Now I'm going to use another activity that you would have learned about in the Tech Primer course. It's down here in workflow control flow called for each. I'll drag that activity after the assign, and I'm going to say for each file in this variable that I called all files, I'm going to do something here in this body. What am I going to do? I want to read the file. So I'll type in READ up here in this filter, and down here you can see I found an activity called read text file. So I'll drag that into the body here, and now it says that I need to put a file name in here. So what I can do is I can simply grab this file from my for each, which is now technically a variable, and I can just paste that right in there. And when it reads the file, it's going to need a location in memory to store the contents of the file that it reads. So I need to go up here in this properties area, click in here, and right click again and say create variable. And I'm going to name this variable file contents. And even after doing that, these exclamation points didn't go away. So it says one or more children have validation errors or warnings. The tool is telling me when I hover over this blue one here, it says, hey, there's a compiler error encountered when processing the expression file. It says I can't convert object into a string. So again, from the Tech Primer course, you would know by now that what you need to do is just type in .toString and hit tab, and everything clears up. So now the robot is going to read each file in the directory containing all my files, and it's going to read that file and save the contents into this variable called file contents. And now again from the Tech Primer, we're going to do a conditional here. I'll say if. So I grab the if block and drag that under here, and it's saying if some condition is true, then we'll do this, otherwise we'll do that. So I'm going to say if my file contents .toString again is equal to an empty string, which means nothing, what I want to do in that case is to append some information to a file. So I'm going to say append line. I'm going to click and drag that guy on here, and it's asking me for a file name. So I'll just put it in the same directory as we did up here. You may recall it was C robot files. So I just copied that, and I'll put an additional backslash on here and call this results.txt. And what am I going to append to this file? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this file.toString, which is my path to the file. I'll say file.toString plus, and then I'll start my quotes, and I'll type in was empty. And now I'm going to copy that and paste it here, because if my file contents is not empty, it's going to do this branch right here. So I'll append to the same file, and I'll include the file name, and I'll say contained text :space plus, and now I'll include the file contents. So when I run this robot, it's going to create a list of all the files in that directory. It will loop through each one of them, read the text file. If the file is empty, it will append the path of the file and say was empty. Otherwise, it'll append path to the file and it'll output the text. So we're going to wind up with one more file in here called results.txt that will have whatever text was in these files. So to run it, all I've got to do is click on this triangle up here at the top, and away we go. So the robot just ran. You see that I have a results file now. I double click and it says doc1 was empty, doc2 contained text you found me, doc3.txt was empty. So it's that simple to create and run a software robot. Now that you have a basic understanding of the end-to-end process of creating and running a software robot, let's take a look at installing it on Windows and then dig into all the specifics.